The following is a sermon from Grace City Church in Denver, Colorado. Grace City exists to make and mature disciples of Jesus Christ. For more info, visit gracecitydenver.com.
Today we'll be reading from Exodus 2, 1 through 10. Now a man from the house of Levi went and took his wife, a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she took him a basket made of bulrushes, and daubed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the river bank. And his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Now the daughter of her woman, and she took it, the river. She saw the basket among the reeds, and sent her servant woman, and she took it. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then his sister said to the Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go on and call you a nurse from the Hebrew woman to nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. When the child grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, because she said, "I drew him out of the water." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. A few winters ago, our family wanted to escape for a few days, just get up to the mountains for a little bit of rest and relaxation, as many of you have done. And we immediately encountered what you have encountered if you've lived here more than 2 weeks, which is that traffic is not at all moving on Floyd Hill. And so our mapping software, which I think I was using, Waze, says, okay, let's go the back way through Blackhawk and Central City, and then you can come down and get on I-70 and kind of go from there, and you'll get around all of this traffic backup. And so I'm like, okay, that's cool. We'll just do this. It's another 15, 20 minutes or whatever it is, but that's fine. You know, we'll get where we're going, enjoy our vacation. And as we're getting closer and closer to getting back down to get on I-70, the mapping software is just showing you, hey, traffic is now stopped on I-70. And so it begins this whole series of reroutes. And if you have one of those real-time things and you're driving, and it's like, hey, take this little side street that you've never taken before. And now you're on residential streets cutting through these little mountain towns. And we keep kind of zigzagging back and forth across I-70. And every time you look down and see it, you're like, yeah, I feel sorry for all those people because they're just stuck. But, we continue to kind of creep along, move through these different neighborhoods we've never seen. And I know this sounds amazing to some of you because for you, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And genuinely, I'm happy for you. I am not wired that way, but I'm trying to make the most of it. So Marty and I are there, and we're like, oh, hey, kids, look, that's a really cool house, right? And, oh, I didn't know there was a coffee shop back in here. And you're like, oh, there's a beautiful view of Clear Creek that we've never seen before. And then you do the dad thing, and you're like, look, kids, horses, And finally, we get back down to the last possible merge onto I-70, like Strawberry Fields or Strawberry Hill, whatever it is. And traffic is stopped. So we pull over. I'm looking on like the CDOT website or updates or something, and it says something like there's a rock slide across I-70, and there is no anticipated time for the highway to reopen. And we waited a few minutes, kind of like, what do we do? Do we wait? And they're like, well, it could be days. And so on that merge, we took a left instead of a right. We got on eastbound I-70, and we drove home. And after all those maybe hours, it was more than an hour, just driving around, seeing all this different stuff, we ended up right back where we started at our house. And sometimes life is like that. Sometimes the Christian life is like that. Okay? What do I mean? I mean, have you ever sensed God calling you or inviting you to do something specific with your life, to do something with an opportunity that seems to be in front of you. And you say, yes, Lord, I'm following. Here am I. Send me. I want to be a part of what you seem to be calling me into. Or you're just looking at the word and you're like, it's just a matter of obedience to the word. I want to do that. And then for days or weeks or months or even years following that, it feels like every single circumstance is either an obstacle or a detour to what you feel like God called you to do. And I want to begin this morning by just asking, what if I told you that what feels to you like wasted time, maybe wasted years, it actually has a divine purpose? What if you knew that God was working in everything, including your sin and mistakes, to make you into the person that He wants you to be? What if you knew that the lessons that you were learning and the character you were developing, the faith that was being strengthened in you in the waiting was preparing you for something greater that God can only do if you go through all those detours and obstacles? Would that change how you face those detours and obstacles today if you really believe that? Okay, last week we began a new study in the book of Exodus. And we saw right away that the people of God, the Hebrews or the Israelites, the people of Israel, they are immediately flourishing in the land. We read there the words of Genesis 1. The people are fruitful and multiplying and filling the earth. They're being obedient to God. They're trusting God, and God is blessing them. And then almost immediately the story takes this dark turn where a new Pharaoh comes to power. He doesn't know the backstory on Joseph and how they got there, and he doesn't care. He just sees the Jews, the Hebrews, are a current problem, so he enslaves them, and he oppresses them. And worse yet, we end chapter 1 last week by seeing he actually seeks this genocide of an entire people by commanding that every single baby boy be thrown in the Nile River and killed. And it's clear at the end of Exodus 1, where we ended last week, the Israelites are not in need of good advice or just like some random act of kindness. They need a deliverer. They need a savior. They need someone to step into Egypt and rescue them. And Exodus 2 introduces us to that deliverer. And if you know Exodus, it's a man by the name of Moses. And this morning I want to show you 5 ways that God prepared Moses for what's coming next. 5 ways that God prepared Moses for his eventual and most famous calling. But now here's the backstory. Verse 1, now a man from the house of Levi went and took as his wife a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, which, it's just stopping there for a moment, it doesn't mean like, oh, he's cute, let's keep him. It just means like there were a lot of sickly children born back then. Children that under oppression, under slavery, under malnutrition, were never going to really have a chance at life. But she's looking at him and being like, he's strong, he's healthy, so she hid him for 3 months. And it's a tale as old as time. Couple meets, they get married, they start a family, but this son is born under an edict of death. This son is supposed to be killed by his own parents. But fearing God, as we saw last week with the midwives, the doulas of Israel, fearing God rather than the edict of an oppressive, tyrannical ruler, they obeyed God rather than man, and they kept him alive. You ever tried to hide a baby? Yeah, me neither. That sounds wrong. But if you know babies, babies cry, okay? Babies cry when they're hungry. Babies cry when they're tired. Babies cry when mom leaves the room. Babies cry when they want you to pick them up, and they cry when they want you to put them down. Babies cry when they have a messy diaper. Babies cry when they have an upset tummy. Babies basically cry every time you don't read their mind instantaneously and get them what they want. And so she's trying to hide this baby, but babies make a lot of noise. So verse 3, when she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of papyrus and daubed it with tar and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the riverbank. And his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Now, this is a classic desperate times call for desperate measures thing. This is not a normative thing. This is certainly not telling you what to do. Moms, go to REI this afternoon, get a little basket, put your child in the Platte River, get someone to sit there and no, this is how in the world do we keep this baby alive for whatever God wants for this baby next? And I want you to just imagine believing this is my only option. This is my only shot to maybe keep this child alive. Riken says, at one moment in history, God's entire plan for triumphing over evil was riding down the Nile River in a little papyrus basket. And this is point one. God prepares a deliverer through protection. Through protection. One day, this baby boy, again, spoiler alert, Moses, will deliver Israel. But first, God has to deliver him. And by the way, I want you to notice a stunning parallel that you may miss because it's kind of in the Hebrew. But there's a parallel between this single baby's rescue and another famous rescue story in the Old Testament. So in verse 3, the Hebrew text says his mother made a little basket of papyrus, a teba. A teba. And she covered it with tar and with pitch inside and out before setting it afloat on the water. Do you know the only other place in the Bible this Hebrew word teba is used is in Genesis, and there the word is always translated ark. See, this story is the story of Noah's ark in miniature. This baby, like Noah and his family, would not drown, would not be consumed by the waters that consumed so many others, but in fact, the very water that killed others would be the means of deliverance because they're in a teba. God would sovereignly protect him as he sovereignly protected the entire family of Noah because he's inside a teba. And so we're meant to read in Exodus 2. God is delivering Moses in a little tiny ark, just like he delivered the family of Noah in a massive ark. So make no mistake, God is the deliverer of deliverers, and God is on the move in this story. Now, I want to pause for a moment, and I want you to think about times in your past that God has protected you, has delivered you. You know, I'll just give you two examples. When I was a little boy, went over to a friend's house after morning summer camp. We were just riding bikes in the neighborhood as everyone did back then. There was a big lot behind their house, I remember, that had a big embankment, and we were running up the embankment and sliding down, running up the embankment and sliding down. We go back to his house, and I'm like, I want to take one more ride down the hill before I just come right back. And I remember as a child, like taking his bike and riding down this steep hill, and the last thing I remember is the bike began to wobble uncontrollably. And I woke up on their couch. See, this was the time before no one wore bicycle helmets back then. And someone found me unconscious in the road and figured out, who does this kid belong to? Many years later, something similar. I'm doing some work on the roof of my house, cleaning the gutters. I was using bleach. It got very slippery, and I slid off my roof. And as I'm going over the edge of the roof, I had this momentary realization of, like, anywhere that I could land, I am going to land face first on the sidewalk. And I woke up in the hospital. And all the nurses around me were like, did you have a motorcycle accident? Because it turns out if you fall like 24 feet on your face and that impact leaves you looking like you wrecked a motorcycle. Those are two examples, and I would guess all of you have stories. I mean, maybe you weren't that stupid or accident-prone, but all of you have stories where you could look back and say, you know what, I just missed this thing that could have harmed me. God protected me from an illness. God protected me from an accident. God protected me even from temptation. And part of what I'm calling you to do this morning is just pause for a moment, recognize God's mercy over your story thus far, thank him, and say, God, what are you protecting me for? Because you're in the story and you're writing the story, and time after time, You've done things to keep me safe. Now let's go back to the story, verses 5 through 10. We're going on. And I'm not going to reread all the verses that were just read for you, but I do want to summarize that now you've got little baby Moses in this teba, in this little ark, and he's floating on the Nile River, and he's amongst the reeds, and his sister is watching him just to see what would happen. And by the way, this would not call that much attention to the Egyptian people because they're used to seeing Hebrew girls. Hebrew girls are fine. This little slave girl playing by the river, I mean, that just would have been commonplace. But it just so happens that the daughter of Pharaoh goes down to bathe with some of her servants, and she goes to that exact spot. She sees the basket. She says, hey, servants, go get that basket. I want to see what that is. They open the basket. The baby's crying. Verse 6 says, she took pity on him, which is like, instead of recognizing this is a Hebrew boy, dump the basket, kill the baby, she immediately feels compassion and kindness in her heart. And she's like, we're keeping this child. And this sister that we later find out is probably Miriam, unless he had multiple sisters, pops up from the hiding spot. And she's like, hey, so Hebrew baby you found, like you probably don't want to care for him. Do you want me to try to find someone to nurse this child for you? And she says, yes. And so she goes and gets her mom, who is the baby's mom. And Pharaoh's daughter says, I will pay you to raise your own child. So God is preparing Moses with protection. You again see protection, incredible deliverance. But let me introduce you to another word. He is also prepared by providence. Okay, what does that mean? What is the providence of God? It's an important word. It's an important concept. What is the providence of God? Well, from the Westminster Catechism, we read this: God's works of providence are his most holy, wise, and powerful, preserving and governing all his creatures and all their actions. Don't try to write that all down, okay? I can give you these slides later if you want them. Or Erickson, in his systematic theology, says it like this: by providence, we mean the continuing action of God by which he preserves in existence the creation which he brought into being and guides it to his intended purposes for it. So if I were going to summarize those two things, I would give you an idea or kind of a formula of providence that looks like this. And you can write this down. Providence is basically preservation plus guidance plus concurrence. And the only part of that you probably don't understand is concurrence. And the only idea of concurrence is God is preserving and guiding, but through and with the free actions of humanity. Okay, so people, the concurrence is God working together with humans. And he's not saying, I'm going to dominate you, I'm going to force you. You never have a free will to make a choice, make a decision, say what you want to say, do what you want to. He's like, you have the free will to do all that stuff, and I'm also providentially working through what you say and do to ultimately accomplish my plan. That's providence. Ooh, big definitions on the screen. Westminster Catechism. You know what I think of the providence of God as? The fingerprints of God. The fingerprints of God. What do I mean? Okay, you've all seen the crime drama. Like, guy sneaks into the house, and he thinks he's leaving no trace. He knows where the security cameras are, and he commits the crime, and he gets away with it, and he's caught because he left fingerprints at the scene. Did you see this big heist at the Louvre last October? You know how they caught the people? Well, in part, it's because one of the four that went into the Louvre to steal the crown jewels, and they stole them, and we don't know where they are to this day, but one of them had put on a helmet for this operation because he's going up in a bucket truck to break through a window, and before the operation, he touched the helmet to put it on and left his fingerprints on the helmet at the scene of the crime, okay? So the idea of fingerprints is like, though you were never seen, the fingerprints there are the evidence that you were there. And I think so much of what we call just pure coincidence or dumb luck is actually the providence of God. It's evidence, like fingerprints, that God was here on the scene. We just didn't see him. We missed him somehow. So I want you to think about this. Pharaoh orders the death of the baby boy. But who of all people saves that baby boy? Pharaoh's daughter. And who of all people does she pick to raise the child? His own mom, the one person on planet Earth who was most concerned with caring for his upbringing and wanted what was best for him. Now, after that, according to verse 10 and also Acts 7, by the way, where was the boy raised? So his mom raises him until he's weaned, and he may be like 3 or 4 by this time, where he then is brought into the house of Pharaoh and raised by the daughter in the palace. One commentator says Moses was trained in linguistics, mathematics, astronomy, architecture, music, medicine, law, and the fine art of diplomacy. He was being trained for Pharaoh's overthrow right under Pharaoh's nose. And I'll add, in Pharaoh's own house. Okay? Do you see the providence of God? Do you see the fingerprints? Like, you would be there in that moment and be like, how, God? Where are you? I don't see you acting in this story. And years later, Moses will look back on his own story and be like, do you not see the fingerprints of God all over it? Pharaoh did what he wanted to do. And a woman just came down to take a bath. And it just so happens, well, that's God's fingerprints all over the story. And again, I want to pause and just invite you to ask, where in hindsight do you see the providence of God or the fingerprints of God in your own story? Because I'm guessing in real time, there are whole periods of time, chunks of time, circumstances where you were like chapter 1, God, where are you? But looking back, you see the fingerprints. Oh, you were there. You were there, faithfully there, working in the waiting, doing something to turn me into the man or the woman that you want me to be. And I was reading this section this morning. I remembered Mac Brock and Amanda Cook have this song entitled To the End. And there's this section in there, one of the refrains is where he's looking back on his life or she's looking back on her life and says, I was never on my own. I was never far from home. I was always in your arms. You were there. You were there. That's the providence. Now, let's keep going. Verse 11. One day, when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and looked on their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. And I call this next section, prepared by passion. Prepared by passion. Now, I want you to notice on the positive side, Moses had all this privilege. He had all this power. He had all these possessions and prosperity, and yet what was he passionate about? Identifying with his people. Isn't that amazing? Identifying with an oppressed people, an enslaved people, a people who are under the order of genocide, and he cares deeply about what is going on with them. I know they are me, and I am them. And he goes out and looks, and he sees something that disturbed him deeply. An Egyptian is beating a Hebrew slave, and the word here is a severe beating, and it's often even used of killing someone because the same word is going to be used a verse later when Moses actually kills him, the taskmaster. Now, some say Moses was justified in what he did. I mean, I don't know your take on this, but some are like, well, he acted in self-defense. He saw a man being killed, and he stood up for the man being killed, and therefore it's a justified killing. Others will say, well, he was acting officially as the prince of Egypt, so he had that authority in Egypt and from God to do this. And others will say, no, this looks more like an unrighteous act of revenge because his own anger was stirred in an unholy way. And I'll say, maybe we will never know. I'm guessing it was mixed motives. I'm guessing there was some kind of righteous indignation, but he probably went too far. He's not retelling the story all these years later as like, my hands were squeaky clean. He's just like, I had a passion, I saw a thing. And what was the passion? To identify with his people, but he's going to say, I must protect this innocent victim from serious harm. By the way, he looked this way and that. People are like, well, he looked this way and that because he wanted to get away with it. Others say, well, he looked this way and that to be like, is anyone going to help this guy? Because if not, I'll have to help him. We don't know. We don't know. But underneath it, there was a passion to protect the oppressed against the oppressor. Now, go on again, verse 13. When he went out the next day, behold, 2 Hebrews were struggling together. And he said to the man in the wrong, why do you strike your companion? He answered, who made you a prince and judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? And then Moses was afraid and thought, surely the thing is known. Okay, we're starting to notice a pattern. Because the day before, Moses delivered an oppressed victim against an oppressor. Now he's doing it again. And notice, it's not just that 2 Hebrews are struggling together. He actually says there's a right party and a wrong party. There's a righteous party and an evil party. And he recognizes, watching this, which is which. And again, he sides with the oppressed against the tyranny of the oppressor, and he tries to liberate. But now Moses is in trouble because he realizes this killing, I hid the guy in the sand, that didn't last very long. They know, and literally verse 15 says Pharaoh wants to kill him, and Moses has to run for his life out into the desert. But even here in the desert, notice a third instance of the same passion or the same pattern. So now, and I'm glossing over some verses, but now Moses is out here in the land of Midian. He's sitting at a well. These 7 daughters of one priest come to draw water for their father's flocks, and they're watering them. And these other shepherds roll up and exploit their work and oppress them and kick them out. And again, Moses takes the side of the oppressed against the oppressor. And he's like, I'm going to deliver these innocent women who worked really hard to do the right thing. I'm going to stand up with them and for them. And I want to pause and just say, are there themes in your life that keep coming up over and over and over again? That you're like, I'm really passionate about this. I just love it when people come up and they're like, this church should have an XYZ ministry. I'm like, great, say more about that. Well, I'm just really passionate about that. Great, you should do that. Well, no, I think the whole church should do that. It's like, well, other people are passionate about other things. What do I mean? Some of you may have a passion for things like the sanctity of life, or the orphaned, or abused children. You may have a passion for those struggling with addiction. You may have a passion for the immigrant, or the marginalized, or the incarcerated. You may have a passion for holistic Christian education. You may have a passion for children or the youth. You may have a passion for healthy families and marriages. It could be any number of things, but you're like, I just keep seeing this everywhere, that we have a need. Do you not see this need? And the reality is maybe other people don't see that need, but what is your passion? And by the way, if you're like Moses, you probably went about addressing your passion with mixed motives. You probably overstepped some boundaries and acted in fleshly and imprudent ways because you were so passionate about something. You just did the thing and you're like, ugh. In hindsight, I wish I would have done that a little differently or very differently. But it's still there. I mean, the passion is still there. And is it possible that even in your imperfection, God is preparing you for something that deploys that passion in Christian ministry for the glory of God and the joy of all people? God is preparing Moses. God is preparing you through passion. Now, returning to our story again. Moses goes on to meet the father of these 7 sisters. He eventually comes to live with him and work for him, and he marries one of these daughters, a woman named Zipporah. And they start having a family of their own. And we'll see in a moment, verse 23 is going to jump back to the scene in Egypt. But before we go back to Egypt, in closing, I want to note one more thing about the desert. According to Acts chapter 7, 40 years will pass between the end of Exodus 2 and Exodus 3, verse 1. 40 years. I'm looking at a lot of people that are not even close to 40 years old. 40 years is a long time to wait for anything. You're waiting for a stable job. You're waiting to get married. You're waiting to have children and start a family. You're waiting for financial stability. You're waiting for physical health or mental health. You're waiting to find a church that you feel like you belong. There's a number of things you could wait, but 40 years is an awfully long time to wait for anything. The fourth thing God is doing is preparing Moses by, you could say, patience or perseverance. They have a slightly different meaning. Get this, for the first 40 years of his life, Moses was the prince of Egypt. For the next 40 years, he was a nobody in the desert. One commentator says Moses was 40 years in Egypt learning to be something. He was 40 years in the desert learning to be nothing. Imagine what God's doing in his soul. He's a shepherd now. He knows, he was raised in the palace. He knows Egyptians hate shepherds, despise shepherds. He's a shepherd. God, how did I fall so far? I still have this burning passion for my people that I know are in oppression and bondage. And I felt like you wanted me to do something about that. But day after day, month after month, year after year, decade after decade, no sign that God is doing anything. And I want you to pause and think, what is God doing in your own soul when you have to wait and wait and wait? I want you to think about what God is stripping away. I want you to think about what God is pouring into you. Think about what he's strengthening, and think about what he's starving in the wilderness. The wilderness changes people. I'll be candid, I don't deeply trust that many people who haven't been through the wilderness, so to speak. Because the wilderness changes people. When you go through something raw and real and painful and excruciating, and you're sitting there like, I'm on the detour. I mean, I guess I'll go over here. Oh, that's a dead end too. I'm going back over here. Oh, horse. Oh, that's a detour too. Oh, well, at least that's a cool view of the creek. God, I have no idea what you're doing. And that waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, believe with all your heart that God is doing these things in your soul, and he's trying to prepare you in ways that you can't imagine, in ways that you would not choose for yourself, but he's doing something that only comes through that perseverance. How might God be doing that in you now? Finally, let's go back to the story one last time. Let's return to God's people in Egypt, verse 23. During those days, the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery, and they cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God, and God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. Finally, number 5, prepared by pain. It's not just waiting. It is painful, excruciating waiting. After Moses flees Egypt, the horrific abuse of God's people continued for another 40 years. And that's hard to wrap our minds around. That's why we started this Exodus journey with the question last week, where is God when life looks like this? Because the people are asking, where is God? But by the end of chapter 2, after another generation or two of the Israelites continue to multiply and continue to be oppressed with burdens and slavery and genocide, they are not just praying for deliverance, they are groaning. And the words here are like moaning. And like there's some, I mean, some of you have gone there. I've like, God, I prayed and I've run out of words. It's just like, bleh. Like, I just need help. I'm crying to you. I'm begging you. Help. I don't even maybe know what I need, but I know I need you. They're at this place. Can I tell you, that's a great place to be with God. See, the fact is, many of you are too comfortable right now. You are acclimated to American culture. It works for you. There's stuff that bothers you. You turn on the news and you're like, I got to post about that. I hate that. And that's fine. There's stuff to hate. There's stuff, and I mean, like in a spiritual sense. Like, God is against stuff. God is against stuff. And you're like, that hurts, but you know what? I'm okay. And here's the thing. Here's what I mean by prepared by pain. You ready? If you're not sick and tired of where you are, how are you going to follow God when he's trying to lead you out? If you are not desperate for a rescuer, you will never take the hand that's being offered you. He's like, I'm here, take my hand. I'm the lifeguard, take it. And you're like, I'm good. So this desperation, this pain is an awful place to be, but it's a beautiful place to be with God. Because you can say, God, I'm so tired. When you show, I'm ready to go. You show me, you lead me. And I'll say another song that I put on repeat, and this is from Red Rocks Worship right here in town, is a song entitled, I'm Desperate for You. Part of it says, I'm desperate for you. All I know to do is only to let go and fall at your feet. So just as I am with these empty hands, I give all I have, all of me. I'm desperate for you. That is very different than I'm pretty comfortable and I clock in with my devotions. See, if you've got pain going in your life, what I'm telling you is if you're a follower of Christ, if you're a lover of God, he's preparing you. It is not pointless pain. He's preparing you to go somewhere when he shows up in a way that you recognize it's time to go. And I pray as a church, to the degree that we are just parroting the world's ideologies and beliefs and talking points, you'll never be desperate for God if you find solutions in those things, right or left. If you're saturated, if you're satiated with the things of the world, you will never sense a gnawing hunger and thirst for the things of God and for his salvation. But if you're in that place of pain, and you're looking and you're groaning, can I show you the promise this morning? And then I'm done. Here's the promise. God heard, God remembered, God saw, God knew. Praise God. Circle those 4 words. God heard, God remembered, God saw, God knew. And let me tell you, long before the people started crying out, long before they got to their tipping point, long before they're like, okay, God, I'm at the end of my rope, when they were way up on the rope, God was already working. He had already seen their affliction. He had already heard their cries. He already knew their need. He already remembered his covenant. How do you know? Because 40 years earlier, actually 80 years earlier, there was a baby in an ark. There was Pharaoh's own daughter going to the water. He was planting a passion in a man's heart. Whatever it costs me, I'm going to stand with my people, with God's people. I'm going to be with them, and I'm going to be for them in their oppression. I'm going to identify against the tyranny, with the oppressed, with the victim, and help them come out and be delivered by God's grace someday, somehow. God was in all those years of persevering, all those years of pain. And now I can finally come back to the theme that I think summarizes all of this. The Lord uses both the miraculous and the mundane to prepare you to participate in his rescue of others. Your life may be punctuated with miracles, but isn't most of it mundane? Just day after day, waiting, nothing spectacular going on here. God, where are you? He's right there. You were always in his arms. He's preparing you through protection. He's preparing you through his providence. He's preparing you through your passions. He's preparing you through the patience and the perseverance that you're forced to go through. He's preparing you even through your pain to look up and to cry out and say, I'm desperate for God. Will you come and do something? And God answers, I see you. I hear you. I remember you. I know. Let's praise God and go participate in his rescue of other people this week with the way he's working in us.
You just listened to a recording of a sermon from Grace City Church in Denver, Colorado. We hope you can join us in person soon. Thanks for listening. The Lord bless you and keep you. Amen.